for today's service. The title is Holiday Memories, and we've asked 4 different people to share their memories of the holiday season in childhood. And I say holiday season because not everybody is going to be talking about Christmas. And maybe also share a little bit about how their feelings and or practices have changed since childhood. So our first speaker will be Rosa Torres.
Every year growing up, my aunts and uncles would all start arriving 3 days before Christmas Eve. Families would all bring food, beverages, candy, everything to share with each other. During the day, we children would play, and my father and his brothers would go fishing and hunting because we lived close. We lived by a river. The river was right by our house. My aunts would cook and bake, and they would invite us to help if we wanted to. I always chose to go out fishing and hunting and explore the wilderness, although I do love to cook. At night, my uncles would play the guitar, and we'd have a big fire, and they would sing songs, not necessarily of Christmas, but songs of joy and songs that they themselves made and created. And we, the kids, would run around the fire, and we'd be like a bunch of little wild Indians just enjoying and taking in all the music and the fellowship that we all had, the love and caring for each other. The one tradition that I remember is that we had a tamale tradition making. All the aunts would get together and they would start preparing the tamales, and they would be talking about what happened during the year, who got sick and who got well, and what the neighbor said and what the neighbor didn't say. So then at midnight on Christmas Eve, we all gathered together in a car to go to Christmas Mass. And they called it Misa de Gallo. And it was because it was at midnight. That was my father's Spaniard tradition. My mother is Native American, so we didn't have any of her tradition. And after Christmas Mass, I loved it because we came back and we had tamales and we could stay up as long as we wanted to. And once we got tired, we dragged ourselves into the house and we got a piece of the floor because we gave our aunts and uncles our bed to sleep in. That was one of the things that we did. On Christmas morning, we woke up to socks filled with apples and oranges, pecans, and candy. And they said it was Santa Claus who brought it. Although I knew different because one day I was supposed to be asleep one Christmas Eve, and I saw my father in his boxers putting the fruit in the sock. I never did tell anyone though, but so this was how we celebrated the holidays. We centered around family, friends, and the togetherness with each other. That was the most wonderful gift that we could give each other for Christmas. Moving forward, just a little bit, when we were in New Mexico, we shared that with the kids that we had, our nieces and nephews and our great nieces and nephews, and they'd come over to our house, Molly and my house, and they would all sleep on the floor because there were 13 of them, and they would come and stay with us. And so that's been a really part of our lives, is giving to the kids, enjoying them, and having them enjoy us. It's all about community. It's about children. It's about celebrating. Thank you.
Hello. There we go. Okay. Well, hearing Molly talk, it sort of went along with something I've been thinking about actually for years off and on, is that our our Christmas celebrations growing up were great, and they were much like Molly said. It was focused on family, being together, good food, certain family rituals. But I always sort of, I guess felt then that what we did was like what everybody else did. And as I reflect on it, we have sort of got homogenized American Christmas growing up, and that we've lost whatever our ancestors actually might have done several hundred years ago. I have no idea, what they might have actually done. We did the basic, we always had a Christmas tree, we had presents, we had got together with family, we had a big meal with the turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, pumpkin pie, pecan pie, etc. But like, most of my ancestry is from Germany or from England and the British Isles, which is also saying a lot of it's at least genetically German. So, and Celtic. And I have absolutely no idea what my family members would have done, 100 or 200 years ago. So I kind of wish we still had some remnants of that sort of left. I mean, I know historically the Christmas tree is German, actually, but everybody does it. So that doesn't really. When we were growing up, my mom had two sisters, and we would go to one of the three houses, which was nice. And we had cousins, so we could all run around and play, like Molly was saying. And my one aunt did often make some German holiday food, like Stollen, the München bread, and a few other things. But I think she got it from her husband's family that was still more German connected. I don't think the rest of us have anything left of the old country in any way. So, as we grew up, so I grew up Presbyterian, and Presbyterian is fairly, in most of them anyway, are pretty low church, meaning that it was in the Reformation in Europe and England. So the Catholic Church, on the one hand, had a lot more rituals and pageantry and all that. Low church was more where you didn't do any of that, and you had talks instead of the mass. You had people, just sermons, right? And some of the Puritans, and I do know some of my ancestors were Puritans. I actually know my genealogy back, 6 to 20 generations. So I know some of them were Puritan. A lot of the Puritans didn't do music even in services. They just dropped that because that was too exciting. We don't want people to be too excited at church, got to focus on the real stuff. And of course, in New England for a long time, Christmas was, well, and in England when Cromwell was in charge, Christmas was banned. I mean, you would like to think that, celebrating when Jesus was born. If you're a Christian, seems like a fairly, important activity, but apparently, again, as H.L. Mencken said, a Puritan is somebody who lives in fear that somebody somewhere is having a good time. And apparently that was the case. Anyway, moving forward, when my wife and I got married, and this was this month, 37 years ago, we, wanted to up it. And so, we had always gone to whatever church service there was, unlike in the Catholic Church. Presbyterians don't have midnight mass. It was always fairly simple, but there was some church service. When we joined the Mormon Church, it actually didn't change much. There's a few different, it's called a high demand church. It changed our life in many ways, but Christmas didn't change that much. It's still family, food, low church. Actually pretty similar. And Mandy and I, though, we wanted to really do things right. So we sort of upped the game. We did more at home religious things. We put on our own family pageant and so forth and so on. And then, was it about 6 years ago, we figured out there wasn't really a God, or at least not a big white guy with a big white beard. Kind of like Mike Knapp, Sort of the Christian God is Mike Knapp. Anyway, that there might be something, but it's not a big white guy, making everything happen. And so then we came here and to join all you happy lot. And, in many ways, our Christmas still hasn't changed. I mean, there's less religious content, but, when Christmas happens in a couple of weeks, all 5 of our children will be with us. We'll have the same traditional food. We'll sing some carols. Of course, a few days before, we'll have Yule, and that's actually a bigger party. And when David gets well liquored up, he'll start retelling Norse myths, and especially about Sleipnir, and then he'll go out and pour a libation on our oak tree. So, presumably, I don't know if any of my ancestors from 200 years ago were doing this, because I'm sure they were all Christian, but 2,000 years ago, they were following the turn of the seasons and the cycles of nature. So at least, now we have that going on for Yule, for the equinox. So, so, but I've always loved the color, the music, just the cheer, the being together. And even if I no longer think of Jesus as being a God, there's nothing wrong with the message of peace and happiness and love and treating others well, standing up for the poor that he promoted. So we're still there with that. Thanks.
Come with me back to the 1940s, to my memories of what happened each year sometime after Thanksgiving. My parents were Jewish, as were all my relatives and friends, and me. Indeed, my whole world was Jewish until I started kindergarten at age 4.5. And even then, most of my teachers and classmates were Jewish. Perhaps these introductory sentences will help you to understand my next comment. Christmas was either unknown or unimportant to me until my late teens. Oh, I loved the big window displays at Bamberger's department store in downtown Newark, New Jersey. Think the windows of Higbee's department store in that marvelous repeated film, The Christmas Story. But I had no lust for what was displayed. I just thought, how pretty. Those bearded men all dressed up in red suits, standing on downtown street corners ringing bells. What was that all about? My mother's simple reply, they're just men in costumes collecting money for poor people, people poorer than us. Christmas lights? There were none in my neighborhood. I was 10 when we got a car. My father would drive us to the suburbs in December to look at the lights. No, Christmas was irrelevant. What was exciting was Hanukkah, also called the Festival of Lights. I'm not going to regale you this morning with the history of that Jewish holiday. Carla Finelli did a fine job of that here a few years ago. I'll only note today that although important in ancient Jewish history, it's a minor Jewish holiday. It gained some importance only in the late 1800s to the early 1900s as an antidote to Christmas, because Hanukkah occurs sometime between Thanksgiving and late December. Is that why gifts are part of celebrating Hanukkah? Yes. You may even have heard that those who celebrate Hanukkah receive one gift for each of the 8 days. Well, yes, Jewish children often did get one gift each day. 8 gifts, not bad, you think? But for me and those I grew up with, the gifts were mostly just practical. New socks, new ribbons for my braids, or maybe a piece of candy. And perhaps one larger gift, but only if money allowed. I still remember the dress I got when I was 10. It was that special. Celebration of those 8 days each year remains fixed in my memory. First, the menorah. This slide of a menorah is somewhat like what our family had. As a kid, I created the job of guarding the menorah carefully as the candles burned down each night. In those days, the candles were only orange, not decorative like they are now. And those candles melted quickly. I would stand with a toothpick trying to push the melting wax back into the candle so the drips wouldn't make such a mess of the menorah, a task that took at least half hour each night. Playing the dreidel game was another highlight. The dreidel is a spinning top. I'm not going to go into its origins, the meaning of the Hebrew letter on each of the 4 sides of the top, or how the game is played. This slide shows a wooden dreidel, somewhat like the one I had from childhood, and I still have. Enough to say that the dreidel was an easy game, and the winners were rewarded with pieces of chocolate wrapped in gold foil to look like large coins. Finally, there were the latkes, what you know as potato pancakes. That was a special treat during Hanukkah. Latkes with applesauce or maybe sour cream, delicious. You may wonder how we Jewish kids avoided all the Christmas tumult. Well, yes, by 2nd or 3rd grade, we learned to recite The Night Before Christmas. To us Jewish kids, just another storybook. It never dawned on us to ask the non-Jewish kids what they made of that story. And in 5th grade, our chorus would walk the school halls caroling. We Jewish kids in the group never paid attention to the words. We just enjoyed the music. We were so oblivious to the words that I had no idea until later years that what I thought was just another carol actually was a Hanukkah song, Rock of Ages. I want to leave you with this summary. Jewish kids in my era didn't feel deprived or left out during Christmas. We had our own happy Festival of Lights. Thank you.
I wrote some notes, but I don't know why, because I can't read them. I can still write. I grew up Church of the Brethren, which is a peace church, and my father was a minister. My mother was very active in the church choir. She led the choir. She worked on the church newsletter. And so very active, involved in the church. I moved a lot, so there wasn't a lot of tradition related to things being the same until I lived in Elgin for about 8 years, and we had a fireplace and some things that, you know, you'd expect to have in a nicer home. And one of the things I remember about Christmas, of course, is the stockings. And they were usually filled with things that were practical, like what Rosa was saying, apples and oranges and nuts and little candy and maybe some practical things like socks. And so not real exciting, but yet we were always excited to see what Santa brought us in our stockings. So that was fun. I don't remember, we were not very wealthy. We were poor. And I remember one Christmas, we didn't have enough money, I don't think, to buy a tree. I don't remember if we had a tree all the time, but we lived in Bakersfield, California. And so we went out and got a tumbleweed and we sprayed the tumbleweed with gold paint. And my sister tells me that we also put phlox on it, but I don't remember that. I remember the gold paint. One of the things that I was influenced by pretty greatly as I think back about it was when I was in high school, early high school. Our family went and took a trip down to Mexico, and we visited a family that had an opal mine. And we were there at Christmas time, and they did the posada, which was going around from home to home to home and trying to find where Jesus was. And, you know, we went to different homes. No baby here, no baby here. And of course, that was kind of what the path was that Jesus had taken. And no room in the inn, no room in the inn. And we finally got to the last place. And everybody was there, and the cows and the sheep and all the animals, and everybody was there. And I remember feeling like that was very special. And I think the message that I took with that was the importance of letting somebody in your home. And I know I've done that several times through the years, is taken people into my home, and we've taken in foreign exchange students and different things, but there was always that flavor of, you know, don't turn people away from when they need help. So that was important. As far as changes in my religious journey came when I traveled, when I was living in the Philippines and traveling to other countries where they had different ways of worshiping. And, you know, I, of course, had been taught that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the light, and the only way. And I went to all these other temples and different places, and I thought, well, now, isn't this strange? There's other people out there that don't worship in the same way I do, and they can't all be wrong. And so that was when I began challenging my own thought process about my religious journey. And then I came here to Waterloo, and I was in the Church of the Brethren, and they didn't recognize women as highly. And I didn't like that because it was kind of during the women's movement, past the women's movement time. And Ron and I ended up coming here, and part of it was because he was an atheist at the time, and I was still into my Christianity, and this was a place we could worship together. So that really changed the direction of my spiritual journey, because I realized there's more than one way. And part of what we learn is who we grew up with. What was the family that we grew up in? And, you know, I'm not going to grow up to be a Buddhist in a Christian family unless I become a Unitarian, and then I can. So that was good. We always had the traditions with our kids of um, presents. We would sometimes open one present at night, and then we always had the stockings in the morning. And kids were my two sets of kids were 10 years apart, and so as Heather reached an older age, and of course they would ask, is Santa real? And I said, well, as long as you believe. And so they pretended they believed for a long time so that they could keep getting those presents. But as Heather got older, she said, Mom, can I stay up with you and help fill the stockings? So I said, no, you can't do that. And that was my special job. That was something that I really enjoyed doing. I also remember a present that was from a family that was from Russia, and they gave me my first real doll. I got Tiny Tears doll, and my family couldn't afford that kind of a gift. And so that gift is really precious. And now my Tiny Tears doll, the fingers are all rotten off, but I still have it. So I don't know. Let's see. Christmas Eve, we would frequently go to Christmas Eve services and sing lots of songs and go caroling, that type of thing. And I'd say it was a pretty good life. And I still do some of those same traditions, but I also have learned about paganism and celebrating the seasons, nature of nature. And, it's more of a conglomerate of different ways of believing, and I like it that way. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all four of our speakers for coming through with. I didn't know what was going to be said here until today, and it's better than I had even hoped for. So thank you all for stepping up.